Listen to the people. Listen to humanity. Listen to the Parrot. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot. Listen to the people. Listen to humanity. Listen to the Parrot. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Listen to the people. Listen to humanity. Listen to the Parrot. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV.
Undoubtedly, Africa is the best tourism destination on Earth. The continent is blessed with the most conducive atmosphere. To feel and enjoy these blessings, join the most productive one-week tour of the continent organized by Daylight Africa every September 2nd to September 9th to see beyond the fallacies about Africa on the mainstream media. Contact us at daylightafrica@gmail.com or call 718-822-5555. Daylight Africa. Revolutionizing tourism industries in Africa.
Hello, welcome to World Inkers Network. I'm Dustin Pickering, your noble and honest host, and I hope you appreciate my new background, which is my natural flavor here. So today we have Rachel Custer, who is the author of Flatback Sally Country from Terrapin Books and The Temple She Became from Five Oaks Press. She was a 2019 NEA Fellow. Her poetry has appeared or is forthcoming in many journals, including Rattle, Valparaiso Poetry Review, OSU The Journal, BODY, One Art, and the American Journal of Poetry, among others. You can find her works at rachelcuster.wordpress.com. And welcome to the show. I'm going to put you on the spot here.
All
and
right.
nice to see you here. This is good. I'm glad to be in person with you for the first time ever. This is the first time. We've talked a lot over the years.
We have, yeah.
Been wonderful conversations and about poetry, politics, everything in between, literature. So tell us a little bit about your new book. You have a Flatback Sally Country. And that, if I remember correctly, the original title was God's Own Country. Why was there a title change? What prompted that? I'm curious.
Well, we changed it. I had God's Country, and we changed it because there are actually quite a few books already named God's Country, and the title was kind of ironic in a way, because the book explores some darker themes, some kind of, it wasn't entirely ironic, but we just thought, because Flatback Sally was kind of the core character here, we thought it would be better to focus the title on her as well. And I really like what we came up with. I think it came across the way that I wanted it to, so I'm happy with it.
That's great. It's always good to have a product or a book, and once you're through with it and you're actually pleased with what you've produced.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that kind of happens rarely now.
Yeah,
I think a lot of artists are very discontent with their work.
has been so great. They really have.
That's
She
excellent.
she puts together a nice book, and she has been so professional to work with, and I just couldn't ask for more from a small press. I really couldn't. So,
tell us about the NEA fellowship. How did that go?
well, I applied for it, and I got the call that I got it, and I was shocked, of course. The NEA is huge for me, a huge amount of money, and a huge recognition. And so I was just floored, and so honored, of course. And then I got the thing, and it was like I was paralyzed. Do you know what I mean? I wrote a lot of the book, or a lot of the poems from Flatback Sally Country. I did write with assistance from the NEA grant. So I'm really thankful to it for that, and helped me get time to write and have, help us pay some things that we needed to pay while I wrote. It was just such an honor. It really was. And I I kind of after I got it, I kind of got paralyzed and felt like, oh my gosh, now I have to really do something, you know. So I hope the book that's
It's
come out
work.
people like. So
Yeah, it sounds like an interesting book. So when you're looking for journals, presses to publish your works, what kind of qualities do you look for mostly when you're trying to choose where to put your work?
well, first of all, it's important to me that a journal stand by what they publish.
Hmm.
As you know, I've had some journals that
Hmm.
have taken my work down
Yeah.
for various reasons. And after people, you know, kind of lobbied them and stuff. So it's important to me that a journal will keep my work up, which is kind of
Right.
basic thing. But and I really like journals that are writer friendly, you
Hmm.
know, and I don't necessarily mean that as far as like I'm not talking money, but I'm talking about they have policies that are for the writer. I felt one of the ones that I think lately that I found that did that is called One Art.
Hmm.
Have you heard of One Art?
Yes.
And so it's like you send them work, they get you a quick turnaround, they get you a quick turnaround to publication, they let you know they're upfront about what they're going to do, they publish, they stick by what they publish. It's just
Hmm.
basically basic professionalism, you know. So
Right.
they're one of my new kind of ones that I send to as a matter of course.
That's interesting. I think it's good, as you say, that they stick by their writers
Mhm.
and not, follow these tedious and dubious policies of blacklisting and
Yeah.
cutting writers out, which seems to have relaxed in the last, I guess year or so. I haven't seen as nearly as much, and it seems to be it's most active on Twitter.
I
With
yeah, I
yeah,
think
where they
people
get
are starting to kind of ignore
it. Hmm.
that a little bit more. You know, I have come around to a different a little bit different stance on blacklisting. It's the right of a journal if they want to blacklist somebody. The
Right.
only thing that I think that they should do as far as professionally and as far as ethically is don't take somebody's money. If they're blacklisted, don't take their money um for a fee. You know what I mean? Just and that's
For a
just
trade off.
yeah, because if they're
Right.
never going to get into your journal, they shouldn't be paying you to read their poetry. You know, just
Right.
earn their money and say, you know, we're not going to publish you. That's fine. But I think we are seeing less of it. I think
Mhm.
people have. I think it's grown tiresome, honestly. So
Yeah, I think it's too much energy focused on these guys that are doing this are probably just exhausted with all the hate they put out and
well,
they're burnt out and they're not getting anything nearly as much done as they thought they would. I mean, I know they think
right.
they're holding people accountable, quote unquote, but they're not holding themselves accountable. So who's going to hold the accounters accountable, you know?
And I got to be honest. I mean, whether that's actually holding people accountable or not, I don't know. A lot of the stuff they're holding me accountable for, supposedly, or holding people accountable for, is not true in my case, at
Right.
least. And so that
Mhm.
can be really frustrating. But I think that it's just not working. You know what I mean? I mean,
Yeah, it's not working.
so
It
there
doesn't
are
do any
still
good.
journals, thank goodness, that will publish people, and
So,
so
so what kind of themes do you address in your new book as compared to the temple she became? Did you find yourself shifting to other topics, or did you, get into like something more esoteric or less esoteric, more concrete? How did
I
you?
would say more. The language is more approachable, I think.
Okay.
Well, then it's more narrative, I would
Mhm.
say. The poems are more narrative. And whereas The Temple She Became was uh, about my personal experience in a lot of ways,
Mhm.
Flatback Sally Country is about kind of the people that live around me
Mhm.
in a mythologized way, you know what I mean? But it's more about characters and character sketches,
Hmm.
and there a lot of the themes I talk about are like poverty, drug use,
Mhm.
intimate partner violence, the kind of the fraught situations that women find themselves in the area where I live, especially,
Mhm.
and just the difficulties, the day by day difficulties of living life. So
So sort of almost like a Spoon River kind of thing. Like she,
I've
how
heard that
Edgerly
come out.
Masters use the kind of narrative approach. Are they personal narratives? Are they speaking from the persons, or are they coming from like a third party, or
Some
how
of them
do
are
you
third
handle
party and some of them are persona
it?
poems.
Okay,
I had when I was on the Rattlecast, they brought up the Spoon River anthology, which I'd never heard of. So
really?
I'm going to check it out for
Yeah,
sure.
Edgar Lee Masters. We actually just
Okay.
recently published, Transcendent Zero Press recently published his selected poetry.
Oh
It's
wow.
his first full career selected poetry, because
Wow.
Ryan Guth got permission from the estate to edit a volume. So it's called down by, is it down into this land? Down into this land. Yeah,
Oh,
that's what it's called.
I'm gonna
And
check that out.
yeah, it's good. You can get it on Amazon. It's available, just like any other book on Amazon. Down into
Very
this
cool.
land. Yeah, you'd like. I think you'd like his poetry for that reason. He gets really, he's down to earth, and he's very, uses people to kind of portray ideas in a way. It's really
Right, right.
interesting.
Did I lose you? Okay, there we go. My computer switched over into another thing.
Yeah, I got a little beeper on
Sounds
my
good.
thing too, so it was kind of letting me know some movie was on or something. I
Okay.
was like, I don't care about that. I'm talking to Rachel Custer, damn it.
Oh yeah, the exciting.
So how is being a poet to you? I mean, what does that mean exactly? Some people ask, like, how does a poet know they're a poet? I mean, is there a way you can intuit that in a way, or is it just something you do naturally, or
You
how do you?
know, poetry is something that I just do.
Hmm.
Um, I don't I don't like to call myself a poet. I feel like that's a label that other people can put on you or not. Like I feel
Hmm.
like it's something you earn. You know what I mean? Is to be seen as a poet in somebody else's eyes.
Hmm.
Um, as far as I have referred to myself as a poet before, but I try to be a little careful with that word because it feels like an honorific in some ways to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I don't want to say it's like me saying I'm a doctor. You know, if I've earned that,
Hmm.
then that's one thing. But if I haven't yet earned that in somebody's eyes, then I feel a little weird claiming it. You know what I mean? Um,
It's interesting. You sort of an earned title, an honor title. Like you let other people kind of the way they view you, kind of
mhm.
portray you as they declare you the poet. It's like a
Right,
democratic function. That's
right,
kind of interesting how you approach that. I don't normally identify as a poet, like as like if someone asked me my profession or something, I wouldn't say
right,
I'm a poet.
right. Well, because it's so little of a profession. Like it's not,
Yeah,
you know
it's
what I
not.
mean? And not that you can't have a profession as a poet. People do, I
Hmm.
guess, or as
A
teachers
few.
of poetry.
Yeah.
But you know, I really dislike the idea of the profession. I almost
Hmm.
feel like it's a calling.
Yeah,
Um,
that's more like it. I think
and
myself.
so as far as that goes, I feel like that's on other people to say whether they feel like you've achieved that calling or not, you know,
Right.
almost. That's just my weird view on it.
You go through all these, like, these tediums and trials for the
Mhm.
honor of being called a poet. I think that, you look at like the biblical prophets, and they're technically
Yeah.
poets.
Yes.
And they and their trials and tribulations they went through to present the word of
Mhm.
God to the world. And I think that's true of poets generally. It's like we go through these very, the better the poet, the more stone hard they are in those
Right.
terms.
I recently found out that the word, and I hope I'm correct about this, the word I think in Hebrew for poet and prophet is the same word.
Mhm. I think
And
it's Greek too. I think it's Greek.
maybe yeah, and it was so that was so mind-blowing to me to
Mhm.
think of so this modern day word we call poet is the same thing they would have called a prophet. And so
Right.
maybe that's part of where it comes from to me of not claiming that for yourself because that's, you know, to be a prophet of God
Mhm.
is is something that you better be really careful what you say. You know what I mean? And so as a poet, thinking about that being the same word is really just trippy to me to think, wow, you better be careful about what you put out there. You know, make sure you're speaking the truth as you see
Right.
it, because if you're not,
Yeah, to me, I rely on. I guess you could just say it's like the God of the unconscious to kind of speak to me, or
Mhm,
it's like subliminally convey something. I
mhm.
don't. I use a lot of ambiguity in my work, so
Yeah,
it's really hard for someone to say this is true or not true because it says a lot of things at once. So
right.
whoever's reading it can be like, okay, this says this, and then you show it to someone else, it says something else. I mean, some people see, can see as you know well. I mean, like in your poem about how I'm like Donald
Right.
Trump, like, they can see anything from supporting Donald Trump to this is a human poem, an existential poem about
People can
human
see a lot.
vanity. There's a
Mhm.
lot of ways to look at it, and the deeper the spirit of the person that reads it, the deeper their reading will probably be.
Right.
I think I think that's true. As the reader has to kind of draw from the poem what they can.
Right. And when I say truth, I mean, I think there's an honesty though that lies at
Yeah,
the
yeah.
bottom of any good poem. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like there's a real
Rawness.
spirit and there's a true
Mhm.
spirit of truth. You know what
Mhm.
I mean? And so it doesn't have to say, the poem itself doesn't necessarily say this is the truth.
Right.
You know, like this is the only thing there is, or this is the truth about this subject, but there's an honesty to it that says this
Right.
is the true spirit I'm bringing to you. You know what I mean?
Right. So
So I
an intellectual honesty, like I
Mhm.
think, yeah, it's true. The poets have to do the hard work of digging into their souls,
Right,
and
right.
really kind of getting into the nitty gritty and the dark zones too, and finding that
Mhm.
and I think that's what I liked about your poem, how I'm like Donald Trump, is that it went into those dark zones in a way, and it didn't necessarily sound nihilistic or like
Right.
destructive in a way. It was like very human poem.
Well,
That's what I brought to it when I read it.
I think that's the thing that I do, and that's in Flatback Sally Country
Mhm.
too, is humanize, you know, and I'm always on this kick about humanizing. We have to humanize, especially the monstrous.
Right.
Because if you don't, then you don't realize that the monstrous is something that we're all capable of. You know what I
Right.
mean? And that's just my,
I
I
agree
just
with that. I fundamentally agree. If you don't tame your inner evil, if you don't look
Mhm,
at it and say it's there, it's in everybody. It's there. There's
mhm.
good too, obviously, but if you don't look at you don't look at the dark and say, okay, there's something there that's needs to be monitored or like
Right,
kept into line, then you're not really being self-honest, and that's
right.
it's important to be self-honest. It's and Jordan Peterson and some other intellectuals bring this to the core too. They talk
Mhm.
about if it was Nazi Germany, would you be a Nazi or would you be one of the
Right.
protesters? And it's like most likely you'd be a Nazi. I mean, most likely.
Most of us would be, and the reality is, I think that you're more likely to engage that monstrous self or that ability to do evil if you don't acknowledge it. If you don't
Right.
say that's there, I
Hmm.
got to be really careful about not engaging it, and so
Hmm.
it's like with that poem you were talking about how I'm like Donald Trump. Donald Trump, he's not the ideal person I want to compare myself to as a person,
Right.
as a he's not the icon of what I want to be. And
Right.
so it's not as people acted like that was, like I was holding him up as some kind of like this is
Model.
what I want to do. The reality is,
Yeah.
how am I like him in all of the
I
negative,
like it.
what I mean, in
Yeah.
all of the ways.
That's
How
what I
about
gather too from it.
humanity? Yeah, I mean,
You noted at the bottom in the note that Rattle posted on the poem, like it could be Hillary Clinton, it could be any number of people. I mean, to me, it was obvious when I read it. I was like, this isn't even a political poem. This is
no,
not political at all. You're using
no.
a political figure to make a human point and an existential point. I really loved the imagery in that poem.
Thank you.
Of the the rubble going down the canyon and things like that, which got me criticized when I said I liked the poem. They said, you're disrespecting Native Americans. I'm like, how am I doing that?
That
You're
was
white.
one
You don't know.
that was one critique, and I didn't in any way mean to or know whether I was somehow disrespecting
I don't think
anybody
you
in
were.
that
Yeah, I
poem.
don't think you were. I think you
And
just wanted
so that
something to complain about.
that Yeah, that's possible too. I think at the root, that poem is about fundamentally our fundamental humanity
Hmm.
and our ability to, and I thought it was about kind of the vapid nature of
Right. You know,
um,
you
but
remember the controversy over what was it, the Black Sun poem? I think it was
yes,
called Black
yes,
Sun. It was in Poetry
nation
Magazine,
in
and there was a
poetry,
similar controversy like, why are you humanizing Hitler? And he's like,
right,
well, it was a previous poem he had written, and they were trying to pull this up and say,
right,
well, you're
right.
using Nazi imagery or whatever. And he wasn't trying to, my
No,
impression was he wasn't trying to say fascism's good. He was
right.
trying to humanize, as you're saying, humanize the subject and humanize Hitler. So we recognize that this is something, deep in our nature that we could all go that route at some point.
Mhm.
Something could happen. We could all take that route fundamentally. I mean, if given the prompt to do so,
Mhm.
I think it's true. We
Yes.
would definitely have that problem. I mean, it's a human problem. That's the point. I mean, evil and good are human. We
Yeah.
have the choice. To
It it
rattle
makes me
things.
think of the who was it that wrote about the banality of evil? You would know this.
Bonhoeffer.
What was her name?
Oh, or
She wrote during uh,
Arendt, maybe
who?
Hannah Arendt.
Yes, Hannah Arendt
Yeah, I thought so.
wrote about the banality of evil, and I think that's so real. And
Uh-huh.
I just think, I don't know, to me there's so much more power in humanizing than whatever the opposite is, monsterizing. I don't know.
Become grotesque.
Yeah, there's so much more power in creating someone that someone can identify with and then saying this person is horribly evil. You know what I mean? Because then you can
Exactly.
identify and realize, wow, hey, that's in me too, you know?
And it makes life interesting too, because then you have something to battle with. You have something to
Yeah.
duke it out with. And if you don't have struggles and you don't have conflicts in yourself, then how
Mhm.
can you live? I mean, that's just how I feel about it. It's like if you're not conflicted, you're not advancing.
Mm.
You're not looking at
Right.
yourself honestly
That
enough to
makes a lot of sense. And how can you write poetry if
two-dimensional.
you don't have conflict?
Absolutely. If you have, I mean, that's the whole point of poetry is to
It's at
kind
the
of
root. Mhm.
dig into these and look for resolutions and face these ambiguities and these moral contentions.
I talked with Tim Green about wrestling with God. In
Oh
Israel,
yeah.
the word
Hmm.
Israel, he who wrestles with God, and that's what I hope to do in my book. And I
Mm.
think that wrestling is what's interesting. I don't know
Right.
people that want to just say this is good and this is bad in their work. That's just not me. That's not me. I'm not saying that somebody can't do it, but it's not me. So
Yeah, that's cartoonish, if you ask me. It's just like I like to use shadow imagery and
yeah.
darkness and illumination imagery and stuff to kind
Mhm.
of like it's really, to me, it's about like revealing something, you
Right.
know, like fundamentally like looking into yourself and finding a hidden zone somewhere and
Mhm.
surprising yourself in your poetry. So that's to me,
Right.
that's what I find that when I'm writing something, I don't really know what I'm going to write all the time.
Right.
Sometimes I
Usually the
throw
best
something
ones
out.
I think are when you don't know what you're gonna say. If I go into something knowing what I want to say, then it usually doesn't end up very well. It usually ends up with me on some soapbox and it doesn't
Mhm.
it doesn't work out. So
Stuttering.
yeah. Yeah.
So why don't you read us a couple of poems and we'll see what
Okay.
we can
Let's see
find
here.
in your work. It'd be
Okay.
interesting to hear what you have in your new book. I've read The Temple She Became. I have not seen Flatback Sally Country yet, but I do hope to see that pretty soon. I'll grab a copy.
Let's do property.
Okay, I'm gonna put you on spotlight.
Okay. Property. She had a man. They lived alone behind the turned back of the world. They lived alone around the edge of things, rooted their muffled ways through long days. He called her baby and sometimes come here and sometimes you stupid bitch. His smile a canyon filled with small bones. The cold world was her old man in the cold shade of his old grave whispering, darlin', dance with the one that brung ya. Move in the shoes that first rawed your heels. Nothing fills silence like a dead father's voice or a single rifle crack. She had a man. She lived alone. danced alone in the long shade of his fear. They dug their way through life. Baby, he told her, and he bared his teeth at the air next to her eyes, if I ever catch you with another man. He smiled like her father when she caught him slipping his hand up another woman's Sunday dress. The theater of his teeth, she had a man. Baby, he said, and her need for him was a constant atonement of hands. His body the earth, her life a tunneling.
There's some powerful use of language there.
Thank
Especially,
you.
I think at the beginning, the silence, the edge, there's a lot of, again, going back to that, the handiwork of good and evil, it's a very beautiful poem.
Thank you.
Great work.
Thank you.
Yeah. Interesting. Let's hear another one from you.
Another one? Let's go with bait. We've got a similar themes here. Bait. Here's a girl hefted onto this barbed hook of a place. Here a girl impaled on a day. Her 14-year-old face raised as if toward the sun, pink around the writhe of her eyes. An earthworm is nothing but skin and the dirt through which it tunnels, her father tells her as he baits his hook. Don't fool yourself that he can feel like you. A girl is made of skin and the air through which she moves and all the things her daddy always said. If a hook can be a home, she has been waiting long for the cold plunge of metal through her guts. Has believed it will feel something like love or a man. Her pinned, wriggling beneath him and his strength to provide, his calluses, his need to make nobody need. If a man can be a hook, a girl can be two homes, the dirt he holds and the dirt that buries him. A man is nothing but skin and the soil he calls home, her mother says, catching her glance at a man. Don't fool yourself that he can feel like you. A mother is nothing but skin and the fear through which she tunnels and the honesty to call it love. A daughter's young face rising toward a man, skin smooth in his rough light. Her daddy always said, go on, girl, fish or cut bait. Dinner won't wait forever. Small waves against the boat, brief pause of her held breath, brief panic of her hands, her eyes. That's bait.
Wow. You bring out like so much of the cruelty of the human soul. I mean, it reminds me of the poet AI. Are you familiar with her? Yeah, there's some kind of like she uses like a lot of narrative and I've read a little bit of her work. Recently I bought her collected poetry, and
that's a kind thing to say.
I just like your general style. It's like you have that narrative function going on, but you're really digging into the person's interior life, and at the same time kind of comparing and contrasting it with what's going on externally, so you see kind of this like rhythm between the internal and external worlds.
That's interesting. That's what I tried to do, and I think I go back and forth between that internal. That's part of the wrestling, and I tried to do that. I'm glad to hear that it's working a little bit.
It does seem that way. I mean, you try. I mean, the whole image in that poem, that central image of the hook and the fisherman, and you compare that to like a relationship in some ways. There's like the going after finding a love and what love is, and and how it's like a sublime kind of experience. At the same time, you have this embedded cruelty in this person, and you compare it to the fish hook. It's interesting, very interesting concept.
There's a lot of violent imagery or imagery of violence toward women in the book, I guess more the inherent violence in being a woman sometimes. And I don't know, I hope it's not too much, because sometimes I find myself, I feel like I'm writing the same poem over and over and over.
I do too sometimes.
I think a lot of people that way.
Yeah, it happens a lot. The repetition of the thematic repetitions and stuff. I think there's for me, I write a lot about love and grief. It's like my themes are love and grief, 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 love and grief.
Right. Here's another poem about love and grief.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, the poems are great. I mean, they really are
you.
spectacular, and I think especially the ones you just read, and I
Thank
especially
you.
like the second one and the way you know, it made me think also of Dylan Thomas a little bit. There's a poem I just read
Wow.
by him. I think it was called "Ballad of the Long-Legged Bait." I think it's called.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and it's very similar theme. It's a
Mhm.
very different poem, but it has a lot of similar quality to it. Like
I'm gonna have to send you the book.
it's fascinating. I mean, I love the way you know you do those the metaphors. They're actually like they're what I call an extended metaphor because they're not
Right,
really standing in for like they're not just there as technique. They're actually saying something. You
right.
know, they're actually trying to illuminate something about life or
Mhm.
human nature or some aspect of experience, which a lot of
Yeah.
poetry is lacking in a lot of the modes I've seen lately, and you know, especially in amongst our enemy, our collective enemies,
You know, I'm really
drunkenness and
gonna love your enemy phase. I
yeah,
think it just I I just don't wanna deal with enemy energy,
yeah,
enemy,
I
like, it
agree.
just
But again, you go back to that
Mhm.
subliminating love from the energy, you know, the hook, you know, the hook
Yeah.
they hook you in and they've baited you, but then you kind of
Mhm.
think, I mean, is it really worth getting into this problem with this person? Is when I
Right.
just look at them as a human being who's very troubled and not sure what to do about it, you know?
Right,
That's how
right,
I saw a lot of those guys. I mean, I tried to be nice to them, and a lot of them
right.
got me deeper in trouble.
Yeah, it's
I
not
just
worth
left
it.
them alone after a while. You know, just hey, say what
Mhm.
you're gonna say about me. I don't care. It doesn't
That's
matter.
all you can do because people are gonna, there are
Mhm.
gonna be people who say things about whatever, and there's not a lot you can do to change it, so
Mhm.
might as well adopt a kind of a zen attitude toward it, I guess.
Absolutely. I think that's the only way to handle it. I mean, to keep your peace, keep your
Mhm.
mind, you know, focus, and as
Yep,
Bruce Lee said, flow like water.
right.
You know, you fit into any container. I mean, that's how it works.
The thing I tried to do with the book is to do something different than I had
Mhm.
done before with the other book, and that's the thing I want to do is focus on the writing, focus on the book. And now I'm into a whole mode. Like each time I do something, it's like I have to switch it up completely and do
Mhm.
something different. And so yet I'm still writing these narratives about a small town small town
Very
girl.
interesting, though. You do a very good job of
Thank
making that
you.
original and fresh and interesting to read.
Thank you
You
so
know,
much.
the fodder may be common, but the canon is big and
Mhm.
heavy.
Yeah. Thank you.
Very good stuff. So, what are your future plans for a book? Do you have any ideas, or are you developing something fresh now? Or
Well, I've been working on these poems, prose poems. Um,
hmm,
Oddly enough, it's something I'd never done before, so I'm
mhm,
kind of trying something out new. I've been writing in them this during this National Poetry Writing Month, and I
okay,
just kind of started writing them, and they just started kind of coming,
hmm,
and what the kind of underlying idea is, what if these women put out a little small library or a little free library? You know what I mean?
hmm.
Have you heard of these things, the little
Yeah,
free
we've got
libraries?
one couple of them down here and near
Books.
me. Yeah.
So then I started to write these prose poems about various characters in a town reading a book, and how it
Hmm.
applied to their life, or how they reacted to it, or how something ancillary about that book and how it affected them. And I think my goal is to get at how books, affect and change our lives.
Hmm.
And so I don't
Interesting.
know, I'm obviously still in the process of writing it. I've
Hmm.
just started. So I have some poems but that are coming out soon in like Valparaiso. I have one coming out in there, and I have a couple coming out in One Art.
Hmm.
So we'll see how that goes.
It sounds fascinating. I like the approach, and you're definitely taking a different subject. You went from like
Yeah,
the violence and women thing to the books and you
yeah.
know how they affect our lives. I mean, it's a dramatic shift in subject matter. You know, it's very interesting. You know, I hope to see some of these in the future. Like read some of them and give my thoughts on them. That
I'm
sounds
sure you
great.
will. You'll see them.
So do you have any book titles in mind or anything, coming up?
Nothing yet.
Nothing
That's
yet?
way in the future. I'm still writing quite a bit. I mean, I'm not sure if that idea can prop up a whole book. You know what I mean? If I can do a whole book of responses to books.
Right.
So I may have to kind of add in other poems about those characters, so I've worked on that a little bit. I seem to really be in a mode of writing about characters right now. For both Flatback Sally and this new thing is just to get into persona. I like to do that. I don't know why.
That's interesting. I wonder, I mean, maybe it's like a fresh way to kind of explore yourself from an outside perspective in a way, like look at your own interior. Like when I write persona poems, I'm separating myself from the subject, but at the same time, it's me. It's sort of a part of me that's speaking to this person.
I think it's a distancing mechanism in some ways, but then it allows you to kind of maybe say things that you wouldn't otherwise be willing to say or able to say. I'm not sure, but
well, yeah, I think that's the reason. I mean, I recently wrote a review of a poet, and I found his book was very autobiographical in a way, and I was referring to him and his wife in the review, and a friend of mine that was reading the review asked me to change it to the speaker. And change it to the speaker and the beloved instead of the wife and the poet, because it was like distancing from the, I think that's true. It's like, even though the book was essentially, his book was essentially autobiographical, it was, a lot of it was based on his actual experiences and his relationship with his wife. But at the same time, writing a review and making it that deeply personal and kind of was like,
you don't always want to acknowledge that that's the case. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because some of it may not be. And some of it, I mean, some of the way we have to write, we have to get ourselves to write maybe by distancing. So, so it's
an interesting concept. Another thing I wanted to mention to you, remember we went through a phase, or I don't know if you're still thinking about this, about the idea of silence and how that relates to poetry. What do you think of that?
I think it's so important. I mean, I think the things that you're silent about in your poems and the silence is just as important from both a diction standpoint and a music standpoint in my mind, because the music, the times when you're silent is what kind of punctuates the times that you create, however your sound is created. And then the silence, as far as what you don't say, I think is almost as important, maybe more important than what you do say in some ways.
Right. I think I definitely agree. Like, you leave these blank zones where people can kind of fill it in and again, like flow like water into the container kind of thing, like I mentioned earlier. There's I think was it James Wright wrote the book God's Silence? I think
Franz Wright.
Franz Wright, right. Yeah.
Which was brilliant. I love that book. I have that book out right up. So he's so good. He was so good.
I read it. There's a copy at my library up here, and I've read it. I went through it, and I was like, wow,
powerful stuff.
It's very powerful stuff. Yeah, there's a lot of great poets out there. They're not too hard to find sometimes.
He was one that used silence well in his poems too. I mean, you see a lot of white space in his poems at some times, and he just really chose a cutting line, and then that's it. You know what I mean? He would let it go. And I think a lot of us have the tendency to try to explain too much and need to just let that be, and let the reader do what they'll do with it.
Right.
Because that's what silence does, is let the reader engage and speak into the
reflective powers. It's like, I call it, when I see a poem that's too explanatory, it just keeps telling me what to think, I call it didactic.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's just too much,
Sometimes telling you something instead of showing you the truth, So
giving you the images and the
Mhm.
thoughts, concealed through the images, so you're seeing like it's like not visionary if you're too preachy.
Right, right.
Uh,
Preachy is a good word for it. Yeah.
yeah, you get too much talking in there, and it's
Mhm.
like, hey, can you shut up, please?
Right, right. Let
So
me think
what?
my way through things a little bit. So,
Yeah, you want to be able to process the poem. I mean, what if it's
Mhm.
telling you everything? What are you processing? You're just like blah, and then that's it. You're done.
Right.
And you probably don't even. It's not memorable at all. There's nothing to
No.
think about, nothing to reflect on.
Because the poet's already told you everything that they want to say or that you're supposed to think. So what's the
Mhm.
point? I mean, you're done, you know? There's
Right.
no ongoing
No work on your
conversation.
part.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like a challenging book. The book that
Mhm.
kind of makes me wonder what the process was like. It's like
Right,
you read it
right,
and you're like, what was the author doing or thinking at this point?
right.
I mean, like what brought them to this realization?
Mhm. Mhm.
You don't want to be too abrupt and too, like you don't want to just throw that out and just show it all at one time.
Right.
You want it to be an unveiling.
An unveiling, that's a good well said. Kind of and you don't want to unveil everything. It's kind of like
Right. You don't want to tell too much.
it's
Yeah,
kind of like
it's
a negligee in a way, There's strategic hiding and stuff that goes on.
right, and that goes back to the concept of
Mhm.
distance and
Yeah,
silence and all of the things we talked about. So,
yeah.
what advice would you leave us with as far as to fellow poets, writers, and our viewers today? What would you tell everybody out there?
I would say, oh wow. I mean, tell the truth. You know what I mean?
But tell
Tell
it slant.
tell it slant. Be honest. I guess when I say tell the truth, I mean be honest about
Hmm.
what you're what's really in your mind and your heart because the reader's going to be able to discern if you're not being honest and it's going to create a distance that you don't want. It's going to pull them out of the poem. And that's I mean the only other thing, the other practical advice I would give is that a lot of people start out like their poem doesn't start until 3 or 4 lines in. They start
Hmm.
out saying what they think they want to say. Cut that. After you get done writing to the beginning, cut that first part out.
Hmm.
Or if you keep on writing after the natural ending of the poem, cut that out. That's what you wanted to say. Okay, you said it. Now cut it. Because it really is just you leading into what you really need, what the poem really needs to say. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. They say that about prose writing too.
Mhm.
When you first start, the first few sentences are just kind of. I actually heard of advice from a writer one time, just said cut the first sentence altogether.
Yeah. It's like
And
warming up, right?
yeah, you're just
Yeah.
getting yourself. You're booting it up. You're booting up your computer, kind of
Right.
thing.
Exactly. Cut it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good to be the economy of words is what I call it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Choosing your words wisely and thoughtfully.
Right.
So, what kind of shout outs would you like to give? Like, is there any friends,
Oh
family,
my god.
publishers?
I don't know about shout outs. I shouted out one art already and I love Rattle, of course.
Hmm.
They're doing I guess shout out to the people who are doing NFT stuff. Uh Katie Dozier, because I don't understand it, so I'm
Hmm.
interested in it, so that's cool. I really don't know.
That's all right. Maybe just like say thank you to the various publishers you've had in the
Yeah,
past that stood by your work. I want to personally, I want to say thank you to them because that's a tough call sometimes.
I
And yeah,
appreciate that. And
yeah,
yeah,
I definitely want to say thank you to all the publishers that said basically to hell with the critics and the naysayers
yeah,
out there trying to tear you down because you're probably one of them. I've never seen so much energy devoted to trying to tear someone down in the poetry community as I've seen towards you, and I'm just like, what's the problem? I don't get it. They have to make stuff up to
yeah.
attack. They just make it up if they can't think
Well,
of
some of
something.
it's if they can't think of something, yeah, some of it's made up, and I am a conservative,
Yeah.
so there's that. but I guess
Definitely fresh fodder for the liberal environment where we're in, poetically.
yeah, I mean the odd thing is I'm really poetically like I feel like I don't have a tribe right now. So, I tend toward a conservative bent in my life, but speaking specifically about politics, I'm really trying to just avoid. I don't want to deal with all the division and hate that we have going on right now. I need to just
Right.
distance myself
Absolutely.
from it. And
You're
so
like kind of conservative by nature, but you're not really
Mhm.
politically inclined to speak a lot of the subjects out there.
No, I'm
Yeah.
not inclined.
Me
You know what?
neither. I've gotten tired of it too.
And I don't
I
want
like Nick
people. I don't
Cave.
want it to get in the way of my poetry for people. You know,
Right.
I want them to enjoy
Good
because
approach.
what's important to me is the work.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I'm not interested in my stupid opinion on whatever it is that I don't really know much about. You know what I mean? The important thing to me is the poetry. So I
You
hope
should check
people
out
will.
Nick Cave. His music, if you're not familiar with him, he identifies as conservative by nature, but he's not overtly political in his work or
Mhm.
anything. He's a musician and a writer as well. So
Cool.
Nick Cave, he's
I've heard
pretty
of
interesting.
him.
Yeah, he's great. He's sort of like punkish, you know.
Oh, cool.
It's kind of new, like a neo punk or something. I don't know what it would be called, but it's pretty good stuff. You'd
Cool. I'll
probably
check
like
it
him.
out. I'll check.
Yeah. Well, it was nice talking to you today. We
You
went a little bit
too.
over
Fun
time,
to
but that's
kinda meet
great.
you.
Yeah, do a virtual meeting, and it's really wonderful. I mean, it's great that you've got a new book. Took
Thank
a
you.
couple of years to get out. I know that after the temple she became and all the controversy around the Donald Trump poem and everything else, it's really a massive,
Yeah.
thing to get a new book out. And it looks like it's a pretty
Yeah.
solid collection from what you've read from it. It
Thank
sounds
you.
very just fascinating. I'm really interested in it.
I'll send it to you.
Okay, sure. Sign it too. Don't forget to do that.
I will. So it's with Terrapin, Flatback Sally Country. I got to plug it.
Absolutely. Terrapin Books. Thank you. I believe her name is Diane Lockwood, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much, Diane, for putting the book out and getting it and making it available to readers that actually want to read quality literature and not just complain about politics and dog pile people. That's frustrating, and it makes it hard for us as writers to
Right.
focus on the good work of doing quality. You put in quality material out there. It's like,
Well, and you always supported me, Dustin. So I really
thank
appreciate
you.
that. I mean, you've
Definitely.
always been a kind friend, and through all of it, from the start.
Absolutely.
You were
Yeah.
one of the first people I met in the poetry community. So
Yeah, I remember that poem came out, and I ran across it in a feed, someone's feed, a friend of mine's feed, who I was working with on her journal, Yellow Chair Review. She posted it and said, "This is trash. I hate this. I can't believe they published this." And I read it and I went, "I don't see any problem with this." I kind of commented on it, not thinking anything of it. And they said, "Oh, we hate Rachel. We hate Rachel. We hate Rachel." And I was like, getting dumped on about it. And they're like, "You wouldn't understand why this is offensive because you're white." And I'm like, "Oh, someone's racist." I wouldn't get it because I'm white. I gotcha. Okay. It's not like I'm not directly descended from Pocahontas here. And I am actually a direct descendant of Pocahontas.
Wow.
So, or her father anyway, it was like my mother's great, way down the line, direct descendant. So it's like, yeah, there's nothing offensive in this poem. I'm sorry. You're finding offense. You're finding the offense. You're looking for something to be angry about because you have a problem with this person's politics, and it's slightly politically slanted, and it's not even a political poem. I'm sorry, it's not. And they got mad at me and they dumped on me, and I'm like, go ahead, I don't care. It's not like I wasn't bullied in high school and pushed around by my own parents.
Kind of used to it, huh?
It just doesn't bother me. I just laughed at them. I was like, I actually did the love thing, like when they started posting on Twitter about how my publishing company was trash and all that. I just went through liking all their comments, and they made comments about that too. It was so funny. Who the hell does this? Who the hell likes comments against themselves? I'm like, I do. I'm glad you're saying something. I mean, it's better than saying nothing. You're giving me free publicity.
Right.
Yeah. It was funny. I found them very funny people, to be honest with you.
Well, I didn't find it that funny, and it really hurt me.
Yeah, I know.
I get what you're saying, but I had to step away for a while, and that's why, it took me a while to kind of get back in a mode of writing and But now I'm in a much more solid place, and I feel good about what Terrapin and I have come out with. I think it's a it's a work of art, and I love it. So
yeah, I do remember some of the things they threw in there with against you were just horrendous. I mean, I can see the pain that would cause. I mean, going after your daughter, for instance, and making the comments they made, and that was just uncalled for. They did the same thing to Claire Lemon at Twillette recently. Like not the same people, but the same kind of people, you know, went after her kids. And
I think part of the problem is social media. You know, social media encourages people to dehumanize people and to be cruel, and I think that's why I'm on social media to promote my book, but I'm very careful and specific about how I use it now. So unfortunately,
well, I'm glad you're back on. I know I had to write you letters to get in touch with you for a while.
Yeah, a lot of people. I kind of went off the grid for a while. So
it's good to have you back. I mean,
that's where the poems came from, though. You know? Yeah.
It's really wonderful to talk to you today, and it's been a really good conversation. We went a little bit over time, but hey, I think we just had a great conversation. I even skipped the commercial break. You know, just I'm in charge here, so this is my show. I had to clear territory.
Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much. I'm gonna go ahead and close the show. Thanks for
right.
watching World Inkers Network. Please subscribe to our channel, and I hope you enjoyed that wonderful conversation with Rachel Custer. Take a look at her work. You know, look for her works, and look for her works at Rattle Magazine and other places. And so, if you want to, also everybody out there, you can donate to our this wonderful cause of World Inkers Network. You can send money to our support, paypal.me/nyparrot. And there you will find that we will receive the money and we will use it to good ends to continue promoting poetry and literature and scholarship and everything we can do to get the literary community with some stalwart members like Rachel Custer herself and others. We've interviewed a lot of people, so help us keep afloat, and we would love to have your donations. And if you want to be on the show, you can send a bio and a headshot there to publication.worldinkers@gmail.com and send your bio and your headshot and maybe a couple of sample works. And I want to just announce quickly that we're having a Sylvia Plath webinar this weekend, Saturday on the 22nd. At 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. That's 8:30 Indian time, as well as 11 o'clock a.m. at Eastern Standard Time and 8 o'clock a.m. in Pacific Time, and whatever other time zones. You know, I guess you can figure those out if you just remember 10 o'clock Central Standard Time. So hopefully we'll get some viewers on that. And thank you for watching today. Please subscribe to our channel and have a wonderful, wonderful afternoon. And remember to do as I say, get to writing, do some reading, enjoy.
Listen to the people. Listen to humanity.